Tate Reeves is the governor of Mississippi. And he's been on Jake Tapper a couple times. I'm not really sure why he keeps going back. He must like it. And Jake Tapper wants to just rip into him about the vaccine numbers in Mississippi and why they're low. Not just low, but the worst in the entire nation.
As I don't need to tell you, I'm sure Mississippi is dead last in the U.S. right now when it comes to vaccinations. According to your state's data, only 30% of Mississippi residents are fully vaccinated. Fewer than half of adults have received at least one dose. So it does not look like you're going to meet President Biden's goal of 70% of adults at least partially vaccinated by Independence Day.
Okay, so he starts off, he goes, hey, thanks so much for being here. You're last in the nation when it comes to vaccinations. You're last in the nation when it comes to adults getting this jab in their arm. And you know, Tate Reeves is sitting there and he's listening to this. He's like, yeah, I know. You're not telling me anything I don't know. So then Jake Tapper gets to the whole meat of the issue.
Why is Mississippi so far behind the rest of the country?
Okay, why is Mississippi so far behind the rest of the country? Now, he's talking about vaccines. And the reason is basically because Mississippi just doesn't care about anybody but Mississippi.
What President Biden's goals for July 4th or otherwise are arbitrary, to say the least.
This goal of 70% of adults vaccinated by July 4th, this is a goal that Joe Biden came up with on his own. It's Joe Biden's goal. It's not my goal. It's not Ron DeSantis, nobody's goal, but Joe Biden's. Joe Biden, he had, I guess it seems like it sounds like a good number. Maybe he talked to a couple of people. Maybe he talked to Dr. Fauci, got him involved. But he came out there and said, I want 70% of people vaccinated by July 4th. And then maybe then you'll be able to have your barbecue or your cookout or hang out with your friends or celebrate independence. And it's arbitrary. You know, that's not what we measure things by. What we measure things by are how many people are in hospitals, how many people are getting this disease, how many people are dying from it. In Mississippi, it's fewer and fewer.
We've got somewhere probably between 1 million or so Mississippians that have natural immunity, and because of that, there is very, very, very little virus in our state.
They have people getting vaccinations, not as many as every other state, but they believe that they've mitigated it. They believe that they have that herd immunity, and they believe that if they've had it once, they're not going to get it again, and the numbers seem to back that up. But here's where it gets really interesting, because once again, as we said before, Tate Reeves is not just a conservative, a Republican, but he's a strong Republican, and he doesn't care about the rest of the country. He doesn't care about what Joe Biden thinks about him. He doesn't care what CNN thinks about him. He definitely doesn't think think anything about what Jake Tapper thinks of him. And he also likes to take every opportunity he can to throw Donald Trump's name in the mix, because he knows if you really want to tick off people at CNN, mention Donald Trump during your interview. In fact, I think it's a game. You know how like there's those games where they're like, hey, pick a word and I'll work it into my speech, or give me like some kind of signal, and when I go on TV, I'll do it, and then only you and I will. I think they do that with the Republicans. I think Tate Reeves and everyone else is like, when you're on CNN, you have to try to say something about Donald Trump, something positive about Donald Trump at least once, and he does.
The question is the why. Why are we taking the vaccine, Jake? The reason the vaccine is being distributed, and thank God for the Trump administration that we were so quick in getting it done. But the reason it's being distributed is to drive numbers down. And it's happening in our state, and I'm hopeful it's happening in other states as well.
And then Jake Tapper says this, which just made me chuckle.
You would argue, you would agree that Mississippians watching right now should go get vaccinated, yes?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think there's a lot of people in Mississippi watching CNN on a Sunday morning or ever. Maybe there's like 2 Mississippians who are trapped at an airport somewhere and CNN's still on, and they're like, oh, and they don't, their cell phones are dead, so they're forced to watch Jake Tapper on Sunday morning. Maybe that's what he's talking about. But there's not a lot of Mississippians that care what Jake Tapper's saying, and they already know their governor's position. And so then and what happens is, this is where it gets really weird. And they do this on CNN all the time. Tate Reeves answers Jake Tapper's question, but he doesn't answer it the way Jake Tapper wants. So Jake Tapper starts yelling out the answer he wants over Tate Reeves. It's a really bizarre style of broadcasting and interviewing somebody.
I would absolutely agree, Jake. I think that all Mississippians and all Americans should go get vaccinated, because I think it's safe, I think it's effective, and I think it's one way to continue to drive down the numbers. But I also, Jake, and this is where I differ from the Biden administration. This is where I differ from you and so many other people.
It's not just about numbers.
It's about saving. So he answered the question. He goes, yes, I agree with you. I think we should go out there and get vaccinations and drive down the numbers. But what he didn't say was save lives, which Jake Tapper wanted to make sure people heard. So he starts yelling it on top of him. It's really, first of all, it's rude. Second of all, it's unprofessional. Third of all, it's exactly what you would expect on Sunday morning from CNN. But in the end, Tate Reeves says something which Jake Tapper hates, which CNN hates, which all of the major media outlets hate, which all the Democrats hate. He reminded Jake Tapper that here in the United States of America, if the president of the United States says, I want 70% of the population vaccinated, I want everybody vaccinated before they even think of lighting off a firework for the 4th of July, I want 70% vaccinated before we could open up any school, any park, any beach, any nightclub, any movie theater. I want 70% blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, because in the United States of America, we have freedoms and we have the individual right to decide what to do with our bodies and with our health.
Individuals can make their own decision as to how to protect themselves and their families. Government's role here is to make the vaccine available, to make it easily accessible for Americans, to make it easily accessible for Mississippians. We've done that in our state. We've done that in many other states around the country. And now I encourage my fellow Mississippians to go get vaccinated, but that's an individual choice. And we've got to get out of this idea that central government in Washington, D.C. knows best on all decisions. And that's the view of the Biden administration and so many others in the far left.
This isn't the first time, by the way, that Jake Tapper and CNN have had their butts handed to them by this backwoods Mississippi governor who they believe is a country bumpkin, but in many ways is more of a constitutional scholar than any one of their counterparts at their network. It's really, I mean, it's really Tate Reeves. I'll be honest with you, I hope that he goes farther in politics than just governor of Mississippi, because he's one of those people you got to watch out for. You know, you think it's like when you have a Mike's Hard Lemonade. You know, you think it's just going to be like sweet and kind of refreshing, but all of a sudden, it smacks you, man, and you're like, and then next thing you know, you're laid out on the floor.